One of the important aspects of management is to understand motivation and job performance of employees. Ever since the concept of management began, we had been concerned about human motivation, and in today's discussion we are taking up what is the process of motivation in the work situation. Motivation, as you say, that the situations are important for motivation, and in reality motivation is a multidisciplinary concept. People work for money, people work for fame, people work to utilize their time, to use their creativity, or for their social image. So, the interplay of cultural, economic and organizational factors are important in the process of motivation in general and work motivation with specific reference to performance. When we are talking about motivation, the idea of motivation is that there is a drive in every individual that takes you ahead. So, whenever you are talking about a concept called I wish to do something, I want this, I wish I could have done this, these are all motivational statements. Therefore, when we are talking about work motivation, every organization tries that people should be motivated to produce better and they should be satisfied in turn. So, motivation is a process that starts with psychological or physiological deficiency or need that activates behavior that is aimed at a goal or incentive. You can understand that in the process of motivation, goal is very important. What are we trying to achieve? And everyone must be very clear that I am working because of this reason. However, motivation, which refers to willingness to do something which is conditioned by the action's ability to satisfy some need for the individual. So, in the process of work motivation, individual needs also become very important. When we are talking about the basic motivation process, then what we find that there are needs in human beings. All of us have some needs and we would like to satisfy those needs. So, when we talk about drive, basically this drive is to satisfy some needs in you. Needs could be physiological, needs could be social, needs could be psychological. So, when we see the basic motivational process, the model will go like this, that there are unsatisfied needs which will create some kind of a tension in you, which creates drive, and then there is a search behavior, and this in turn leads to the satisfaction of need, and finally, the reduction of tension. This is a process, and in fact, this process works everywhere whenever we are talking about human motivation. So, you can translate this into motivation and performance scenario. Therefore, we say that motivation is a complex phenomenon that can be understood within a multivariate approach. All of you understand the meaning of multivariate approach, which means more than two variables perhaps are contributing to your motivation process. Okay? As against multivariate, we talk about univariate, bivariate, multivariate. So, the number of factors which could be social, which could be psychological, which could be economic, which could sometimes also be philosophical for the individual, contribute to your motivation process. And as I said just now, just short while ago, that the needs and the multivariate character of motivation could be understood as the biological factors, sociological factors, developmental factors and organizational factors. Biological, we are born with certain characteristics and there is a need, bodily need, which could include need for food, need for sleep, need for water. Sociological, there are social groups, there are pressure groups, and in society we have developed certain social norms which do create pressure on us. Developmental will refer to that how the needs of a child are different than the needs of an adult and the needs of an elderly. So, as we develop, the needs become different for us. And in organizational, which is one of the most important factors for us when we are looking at the management issues or management studies, is that how to create a work condition where people will get motivated, or as we have defined that, to create conditions where workers or employees will reward themselves intrinsically, as we have defined this in some other context earlier. So, an interplay of all these set of factors, these are the broad categories, all these set of factors will result into better work motivation. This is because human needs differ within groups, between groups and across groups. Within groups, you understand? Within groups, that means in this group, between groups, that means this group and the other group, and across groups, across cultures, wherever there are different types of norms. So, human motivation becomes very complex issue because it has to deal with multivariate factors, we can say. When the issue of motivation came up, in fact, psychologists have always been trying to analyze human motivation from different perspectives. But in the management studies, if we look at the development of management studies, as we have done in the beginning of the course, every approach to management has one central theme, that is how to motivate employees for better work performance. Because work performance of every employee will lead to better organizations, organizational effectiveness, more profits, better productivity, and in turn will lead to competitive advantage. So, when we come back to the development of management studies or management thoughts, we find that we began with scientific management, in which we talked about that the reward should be contingent upon performance. Then came the paternalistic management, where managers believed that if we have employed our workers, they need to be rewarded because of the paternalistic attitude. Participative management, on the other hand, talked about creating creative conditions and create conditions whereby workers will reward themselves intrinsically. But there are other systems like the individualized systems, because we have spoken about individual needs earlier, because needs differ for every individual. Managers perhaps have to look into the individualized systems as well. That means, if your needs are different than that of your other friend or colleague, then the management should have some kind of a design to motivate you, because whereas we have general principles of motivation, but individual systems are equally important, and that is what we call that individualized systems. And as a result of all this understanding, we have a combining system approach. That means, if you want to motivate employees for better performance, then a combining system approach has to be taken into account. In fact, this classification that we are discussing now, this comes from a researcher, Gilmer, and in his book on motivation to work, he has talked about this classification. So, we are understanding that motivation is complex, multidisciplinary and multivariate. One of the most common features of designing a motivational system is to integrate money as an important motivator. In fact, most of the managers believe that you pay more and people will perform better. However, this is a myth, because all the time money is not creating that impact as normally believed to be. So, there are researchers in the literature of management, they have tried to look into the impact of money as a work motivation strategy, and which we may call as the theories of money as a motivator. So, once we have tried to look into that, we find that money can be explained as a conditioned reinforcer. That means, we have been conditioned in our mind that money is the most important thing in our life. Okay? But others have said that you can just create a temporary situation of incentive by giving money. So, you pay him say 500 rupees and you expect that in return the person is going to do this. So, or if he has done a very good work, pay him 500 rupees. In other words, when we are talking about incentive, there could be other forms of incentives as well, say pat at the back. But here we are talking about money as a motivator. So, money is also an anxiety reducer because it fulfills our basic needs. And if we look at the theory proposed by Herzberg, which we are going to discuss in great details now, money becomes a hygiene factor. Some of these references will appear when we are looking at the theories of work motivation proposed by various researchers. An interesting fact is that money also has a social meaning. Very little is known about the behavioral laws regulating the effectiveness of money as an incentive. When we say social meaning, that means society values certain things, because our basic needs are not so many. Perhaps basic need for most of us may be more or less similar. I do not know how much money, but that might differ, something like a few thousands of rupees. But if someone earns much more, then it becomes a motivator, because society has attributed some meaning to the value of money, and that becomes a great motivator. So, not for fulfilling your basic needs, but fulfilling your social needs, it becomes important. Now, as I said, Herzberg's theory we are going to discuss. Herzberg and his associates, they proposed a theory called motivation hygiene theory. This theory is also known as two-factor theory, because motivation and hygiene, these are the two factors. And also they introduced a new concept called job enrichment. The theory is also known as satisfaction dissatisfaction theory. So, as we have understood that factor 1, factor 2, that means motivation, hygiene, satisfaction, dissatisfaction, and job enrichment. These are the names given to the theory, and in fact all these names explain some characteristic of this theory. So, in Herzberg's theory, factor 1 relates to dissatisfaction, hygiene, salary, working conditions, type of supervision, financial and other incentives. You can see that money is explained here in terms of salary and financial and other incentives. But the assumption of this theory is that factor 1 is a prerequisite for factor 2. Should I repeat this? Herzberg's theory, the assumption is that factor 1 is a prerequisite for factor 2. That means, if you want factor 2 to be built into the work system, first you have to see that a reasonable satisfaction of factor 1 is provided at the place of work. Reasonable, that means not we are talking about salary, we can't have no salary in terms of lakhs for all situations, but there is a reasonable salary, say minimum wages or something more than that. is necessary if you really want to motivate people. So, the idea here is when we call it dissatisfaction, absence of factor 1 will dissatisfy people, dissatisfy employees, but its presence will not satisfy people. This is something normally you believe that okay, if you give more money it's going to satisfy people, but actually this theory proposes that these are the prerequisites for satisfaction or job enrichment or better performance, prerequisites. Okay. Whereas factor 2 refers to satisfaction, motivation, job enrichment, nature of work itself, flexibility, autonomy, variety, challenge and feedback. I repeat that the factor 1 or all the factors which were listed in factor 1 are the prerequisites for factor 2. That means we have to give them money, we have to give them salary, we have to give them financial incentives in order to motivate them. But if we expect that work performance is just as a result of that, that is not true according to this explanation, because there are different set of factors which are important for motivation. So, the work motivation, if you really want to motivate your employees, then you must create such conditions like give them a challenging job, give them a job or create conditions for flexibility at the place of work. If there is variety, people are more motivated. If there is a greater challenge, if there is greater feedback. But often we find that organizations will not pay attention to these factors, and they believe that if we pay money, our employees should perform well. So, in fact, when we are talking about nature of work, which includes some of these characteristics which we have listed here, like flexibility, autonomy, variety, challenge, etc. All these constitute the enriching job, enriching job. That is why the name job enrichment theory, and the realization that manager's responsibility is not over just by paying very good salary, but manager has to look into designs of jobs which are enriching. So, without money nobody can work, but money is not a sufficient condition. You need to motivate them by creating work conditions which are enriching. Isn't that very interesting? And when we are talking about an issue like participative management, that comes as an enrichment factor, because we are talking about autonomy there, we are talking about challenge there, and we are also talking about sometimes the feedback, sometimes the variety and things like that. So, the enrichment becomes a crucial factor when we are looking at the work motivation of employees at the place of work. This brings us to Another theory, see these theoretical explanations are the propositions, how different authors have looked at the concept of work performance, and by combining all these we can really make a very good practice for us as to how to motivate employees in the organizations, and that is why we are looking at number of theories. So, Alderfer, he has tried to extend Maslow's theory and Herzberg's theory called the ERG theory, that is existence, relatedness and growth. You can see the ERG are the existence, relatedness and growth, which are the core needs. These are identified as the core needs for any individual for their motivation. This is based on Maslow's need hierarchy. Do you have idea about Maslow's need hierarchy? Maybe some of you have. I'll just very quickly talk about Maslow's need hierarchy. Maslow has talked about the human needs in his need hierarchy theory, where he has proposed that the lowest level need are the physiological needs, then come our social needs, security needs, self-esteem needs and self-actualization needs. So, in fact, when we are here is the hierarchy that is proposed by Maslow, which is known as need hierarchy theory proposed by Maslow. Maslow, in his book on human nature, he proposed this theory, even though he himself never went to industries to really test this theory. He left it, it was a philosophical position we can say, and we have been testing that, and its application is ERG theory. So, taking thread from here, in fact, even Herzberg has taken the thread from the Maslow's need hierarchy theory. You can see that the basic lowest order need is physiological, then safety, then social, then self-esteem and then self-actualization needs. The idea here is that human behavior is first the force that is working on human behavior in terms of need is the physiological need. If you have not fulfilled your physiological need to a reasonable extent, you will not be motivated for the higher order need. Why? If you have not had food or somebody has not slept at night, you will find that you feel like fulfilling those needs first in order to do some creative work. So, the reasonable satisfaction we are talking about, we are not talking about the maximum level, because the maximum level might be different for different people, but at least the reasonable satisfaction of the physiological needs that is required in order to be motivated to higher order needs. Then comes the safety. One must feel safety in terms of financial safety, in terms of even the physical safety, in terms of psychological safety, and once you have again a reasonable satisfaction of safety needs, then we move on to social needs. we are social beings, and therefore, the social satisfaction is also required to a reasonable extent. Once these needs, which we call as the lower order needs, are satisfied, we reach to the higher order needs, which are self-esteem needs and self-actualization needs. And actual work performance, if you see, is the result of these self-esteem and self-actualization. Okay. Till the first lower three levels, we are at the survival level, and once these our lower level needs are reasonably satisfied, we reach the higher order needs. So, in self-esteem need, that is when that is the time, when you are not really bothered about the satisfaction of lower order need, and your performance it becomes very important at that moment. And self-actualization need is, of course, when you are trying to actualize your inner potentials. Now, if organizations really want to make the best use of human resources, they should create such conditions that the lower order needs are satisfied, and we can create conditions for giving opportunity to every individual to come out with their creativity in terms of their inner unfolding their inner potentials. So, this, if we really try to practice and we really want to create such conditions, the possibility of performance standards will increase, and of course, we can have much better uh, mark, also in the competition, in the world of competitions. Okay. Even if you are not looking at, that higher profit and competition, but at least you will have, all your employees will have greater meaning in work, greater satisfaction, and the attrition rate will decrease, people will have greater commitment, and so overall better human resource management for you, which automatically will lead to better and we can say the most competitive organizations. And as we have seen earlier, that Maslow's theory has made an impact on the ERG theory and also on the Herzberg's theory that we have just now discussed. Now, an application of Maslow's theory is also given by McGregor, Professor McGregor, who had been working on human resource management and experimented this in many organizations. In these organizations, he found that the lower order needs and higher order needs, these could better be put as very practical categories of theory X and theory Y. So, translating that into theory X and theory Y, the theory, McGregor's theory proposes that some persons perhaps still need to be governed by theory X, and the assumptions of theory X, as we are discussing, are that people are inherently lazy and they dislike work, and people must be coerced and controlled to do the work to achieve the performance objectives, and people prefer to be directed. How many of you agree with this? If your manager assumes this about you, How many of you will agree that you need to be directed, you need to be controlled and coerced, and you inherently dislike work? Will all of you agree to this? What do you feel? As against, as against the theory Y assumptions, that people view work as being as natural as play, people will exercise self direction and control towards achieving objectives they are committed to, and people learn to accept and seek responsibility. So, would you like to be in this, be managed, in the theory Y category or theory X category? What do you feel? Can you think about it? If you are working, will theory Y be better for you or theory X be better for you? Theory Y? Okay. Hmm? Okay. No, I think first let me talk to you about McGregor's theory. See, as it happens that after satisfaction of lower order needs, we are all looking for satisfaction in life, overall life, because see, the work is life. I think I should also discuss, the first issue of theory Y, which I have not discussed so far, is work is as natural as play. Do you find any meaning in this statement? Work is as natural as play. In both work and play, you are spending energy. In both the situations, there are objectives that you need to achieve. In play also, there is an objective you have to win. But what is the difference, if at all? What is the difference? Work and play. The difference is in your motivation, that you enjoy your play, but often you do not enjoy your work. If we can create conditions that you also start enjoying your work, then your work becomes as natural as play. And in that situation, your performance excels, because you do not have any pressure of any kind of meeting objective. You are enjoying this as if you are playing. So, there is a serious philosophical message here. As the managers, you have to see that we create conditions where people will enjoy their work. So, at the place of work, can we give them this opportunity? This is a great challenge for the managers. But all excellent organizations, if you see the examples, you will find that they are trying to create such work culture, such HRD climate, where people enjoy their work and the conditions are created that they come out with creativity. And that is what the future organizations are looking at, and you have to ponder over that how do you create such conditions at the place of work for your employees. So, so far what we have discussed is that work motivation is a multivariate and complex phenomenon, and that needs to be understood within a cultural paradigm. Now, in addition to understanding the work motivation within the broad framework of Maslow's theory, Herzberg's theory and ERG theory of Alderfer, we also have certain issues which need to be understood as the individual motivation factors. And the next theory that I was just about to discuss with you is the equity theory. Now, equity, some of you may be wondering that is it about the price, about money? No, it is about your perception. Equity theory is about your perception, and it is such a strong motivator that many a times you stop performing very well because you have perception of inequity at the place of work. So, what it is? This is very interesting, and you can in fact calculate your equity or inequity in terms of the formula that the ratio of outcome and input, ratio of outcome and input of the self, yourself, in comparison with the ratio of outcome input of the comparison other. So, A is you and B is the person with whom you are trying to compare. Okay. So, that means you understand the ratio of outcome input. You have got something, you know, as whether it is a promotion or it is a salary, even salary or a bonus or whatever you have got. So, you have a perception that how much input did I give for this and what have I got. So, there is a ratio for yourself, and then you see others, how much they have got and what their input they had given. So, some kind of a ratio is there. In the ideal situation, it should be equal as we have shown here. Under ideal situations, the ratio of outcome input of the person should be equal to the comparison other. Okay, that is a very ideal situation, but that does not happen. The reason is that this is a perceptual estimate of what you see, your perception, which is individual and a personal quality that you have. Okay. So, you keep comparing yourself with the others. That happens with the students also sometimes, you know, the equity could be understood, you know, as the what you have got as your result. So, this theory could also be applied there. Okay. But here today we are discussing that with reference to the performance, work performance of employees in organizations. Okay. So, are you with me? That we are talking about a concept called equity, which is perceptual in nature, perception based, and which is saying that the ratio of outcome input of the self when compared with the ratio of outcome input of the comparison other creates some kind of a mental evaluation. Ideally, it should be equal, but practically it is often inequitable. Okay. So, there could be a positive inequity or there could be a negative inequity, you can understand. Okay. If you believe that your output is much lesser than the input that you had given, and the other person had just has not worked much, but he gets more. Okay. So, you can see that the ratio is this different. At moment in your perception this ratio is different, there is a tension. This tension may lead to dissatisfaction, lack of performance, okay, and might create such conditions which may be detrimental to work performance. Therefore, managers must see that as far as possible equitable work performance scenario has to be created, equitable perception scenario has to be created. So, this is very interesting theory, and in fact, this does relate to the work situation on day-to-day basis perhaps. Okay. So, now you can see that if the employee is overrated, then the ratio may be different, okay, or under rewarded. You can see that the ratio will be different. Is it clear? Okay. So, the ratio could be greater than or lesser than the comparison other. But ideally we should try to bring this ratio to the equity situation. Okay. That is a challenge for the managers to create such work conditions. Okay. Therefore, this equity theory suggests that individuals compare their job inputs and outcomes with those of others, and then respond to eliminate inequality or inequity, we should rather put it, inequity. So, you have seen that this is a very interesting explanation which tries to unfold the psychological factors, the perception, the issue of perception, and manager has to be very sensitive to some of these issues at the place of work. Okay. Then there are some explanations given on the basis of motivation to suggest that the personal orientation of people are also important motivators, and these orientations are based on your development, so they are saying that the personal orientations of individuals could be understood under 6 dimensions, okay, based on your earlier training, based on your some of the inner potentials, family background. So, and people prefer to choose one of these careers in their lives, or at least if they have not chosen it in the beginning, towards the middle level in their career, they would like to shift to that kind of a career because that gives them the greatest satisfaction. Say the realistic dimension or orientation is the one where one copes with life by seeking objective and concrete goals and tasks, and would like to manipulate tools and machines. And so, careers like engineering, skilled workers, agriculture, these are some of the career choices people prefer, and if they get into these careers, their performance becomes much better. So, as a manager, you have to keep that in mind, that when you are trying to select people also for your uh, organization, you have to see that what type of orientation the person has. One might be artistically oriented, one might be politically oriented, one might be creatively oriented, and that gives the person the greatest satisfaction. And this is what Holland has tried to put under the dimensions of occupational choices, which have great motivating potential. So, the second one is intellectual. Intellectual orientation refers to one who copes with life through the use of intelligence, manipulation of ideas, words and symbols, and of course use of creativity. Therefore, careers like teaching, writing and science careers fall into this category. Some of us are oriented towards conventional kind of a occupational choice, and only that motivates us. Conventional, one who copes with life by selecting goals and tasks which are sanctioned by custom and society. Careers like library science, accountancy, office work, these fall into this category. Next category is the social, the social orientation. People, those who have social orientation, they will choose careers which are like social work, counseling, etc., because this is the one person who copes with life by selecting tasks that demand the use of interpersonal skills, and they have interests in people. Not all of us are equally interested in people. Some of us are interested in people, we want to help people. Others are interested in something else. So, if person has this dimension in his personality, then then this kind of a career gives him the greatest satisfaction, and in turn, as a person from management, you have to understand that this is the best way to put him on the job in your organization. Then enterprising. enterprising. This orientation suggests that one who copes with life by selecting goals that permit expression of high energy, enthusiasm and adventure. So, not all of us like this kind of a career, okay? But those who are enterprising, they express high energy and enthusiasm, and the career like marketing, politics, management and entrepreneurship are most suited for these people. In other words, they will perform their best if they take up this career, this type of career. And then we have artistic career. We may choose any course that we are doing in our life, but when it comes to joining an organization, usually whatever we have been formally trained as, we take up that as a career. But some of us are oriented with characteristics like the artistic characteristics. One who uses feelings, emotions and imaginations to create art forms. Okay. And these careers include fine arts, performing arts, writing, etc. Now, when we are talking about say artistic career, it is not necessary that as the engineers and technologists you have to take up artistic career. One can combine this with even the engineering career. So, these categories are explained as the basic orientations of people which people will enjoy, but the combinations are possible. Okay. Combinations are possible. So, many of us, I am sure many of you are great artists and great engineers. Okay. Some of us are good writers as well as good teachers and maybe the good marketing people. We do not know, the combinations may be possible. Okay. So, we will take up this comparison when we meet next time.